Everyone told you that leaving would be the hardest part. They were wrong. Leaving is an event. What comes after? That's the part nobody warned you about. It's called identity debt, and it happens in 4 stages. Part 1. The relief that doesn't last. Stage 1 doesn't feel like a stage. It feels like survival. You finally did it. And for a moment, maybe a few hours, maybe a few days, something lifts. You feel lighter. You feel like you can breathe again. And people around you say things like, "You seem so much better," and "You made the right call." And you want to believe them. Then the quiet hits. And the quiet is louder than anything that relationship ever produced. Louder than the arguments, louder than the silences. Because in the middle of a relationship, even a bad one, there's noise. There's someone to text, someone's mood to manage, someone's presence to orient yourself around. And when that's gone, you don't just feel alone. You feel like the structure holding you up has been removed. And you realize, maybe for the first time, that you had been using the relationship to know who you were. That's not weakness. That's what happens when 2 lives fuse together over time. The relationship becomes load-bearing. And when it ends, you don't just lose a person, you lose the architecture. The relief is real, but it doesn't last. Because underneath it is a question that nobody prepared you for. Not, will I find someone else? Not, did I make the right choice? But something quieter and more unsettling than either of those. Who am I now? Part 2. The wrong grief. This is the stage that confuses people the most. Because the grief arrives, and it feels wrong. You expected to miss them. And you do, sometimes. But that's not the grief that keeps you up at night. The grief that catches you off guard is a different one entirely. It shows up when you're doing something completely unrelated. Watching a show you used to love, running into an old friend, hearing a song that has nothing to do with them, and suddenly you feel this hollow, specific ache that has nothing to do with the person you left. It's the grief of a self you've lost track of. Because here's what happens inside a long relationship that nobody talks about. You adapt. Constantly. You adjust your tone for their moods. You edit your opinions to avoid conflict. You let certain friendships fade because they didn't fit the relationship. You stop doing the things that were only yours, the habits, the hobbies, the version of yourself that existed before they did. And you don't notice any of this happening because each individual compromise feels like love. It feels like maturity. It feels like choosing the relationship over your ego. But over time, those compromises accumulate into something. A version of you that was built around surviving that relationship. And now that the relationship is over, that version of you doesn't know what to do with itself. This is identity debt. The self you borrowed against to keep the relationship afloat. And now, the bill has come due. The grief isn't for them, it's for you. For the version of yourself that quietly went underground while you were busy trying to make it work. And the reason it feels so disorienting is because most people don't even realize that's who they're mourning. They think they miss their ex, and maybe they do. But what's really aching is the self they can't quite locate anymore. Before we get into stage 3, because this is where it gets really specific, if this is already hitting home, go ahead and subscribe. Every week, I put out videos on the patterns nobody names but everyone lives through. And hit like. It genuinely helps more people find this who need to hear it. Part 3. The inventory stage. 3 is when you start to look around and take stock of what's missing. And it's uncomfortable in a very specific way, because some of what you find surprises you. You realize you stopped calling certain friends, not because anything happened, just because the relationship took up the space where those friendships used to live. You realize you have opinions you haven't expressed in years. Small things, where you want to eat, what you want to watch, how you want to spend a Sunday. Things so small you didn't notice yourself surrendering them, but they add up. You realize you can't remember the last time you did something that was purely, entirely yours. Not shared, not compromised, not edited for someone else's comfort. Just yours. And here's where the inventory gets heavy. Because it's one thing to realize you gave things up. It's another to realize you can't fully remember what they were. You know there was a version of you that had sharper edges, stronger opinions, clearer preferences, a way of moving through the world that was distinctly yours. But that version feels like a photograph you can almost remember taking. You know it exists, you just can't quite see it anymore. And the inventory gets harder still when you start asking not just what you gave up, but what you became. Because some of what you find isn't absence. Some of it is presence. A sharper edge in the wrong direction. A shorter fuse. A habit of managing instead of feeling. A reflex of scanning the room for someone else's emotional temperature before you let yourself have one of your own. You became someone who was very good at anticipating what the relationship needed. And now that the relationship is gone, that hypervigilance has nowhere to go. So it follows you. Into rooms where no one needs managing. Into moments that are supposed to be peaceful. It sits in you like a habit that hasn't gotten the memo yet. Relationships shape us. That's not a flaw, it's how intimacy works. But certain relationships shape us into smaller versions of ourselves. And the inventory of stage 3 isn't just about reclaiming what's lost. It's about honestly looking at what you were turned into and deciding which parts you want to keep and which parts were never really you at all. Part 4. The Return. This is the stage nobody tells you is coming, and it's the most disorienting one of all. Because you expect coming back to yourself to feel like a homecoming. You expect it to feel good. And sometimes it does. But a lot of the time, it feels strange. Because the person waiting for you on the other side of this relationship has been gone long enough that they feel like a stranger. You try something you used to love, and it doesn't land the same way. You reconnect with an old version of yourself, and it fits differently than you remember. You don't know what you want for dinner, what kind of music you're in the mood for, what a Saturday looks like when it belongs entirely to you. And that confusion, that not knowing, can feel like something is wrong with you. It isn't. It's just the disorientation of excavation. Because you don't rebuild after a relationship ends. You excavate. You go digging for the person who went underground to survive it. And that person has been down there long enough that they've changed too. They've grown in the dark. They've become something that doesn't map perfectly onto who you were before. And that's not loss, even though it feels like it. That's evolution. That's the self that survived. The return isn't a moment. It's a process of reintroduction, of sitting with yourself long enough to remember what you actually think, what you actually feel, what you actually want, not what someone else needs you to want, not what keeps the peace. What is actually, honestly, yours. Here's the thing nobody says clearly enough after a relationship ends. The hard part was never leaving. The hard part is paying back the identity debt. Reclaiming the pieces of yourself that got quietly traded away over months or years of trying to make something work that was costing you more than you realized. And if you're in the middle of that right now, if you left and you're standing in the quiet wondering where you went, I want you to hear this. The fact that you're asking, "Where did I go?" means you're still there. People who have truly lost themselves don't ask that question. They stopped noticing. The asking is the self, refusing to disappear completely. You don't have to have it figured out. You don't have to feel like yourself yet. You just have to keep looking. Keep excavating. Keep choosing, slowly, imperfectly, the things that are actually yours. Because the version of you that went underground to survive that relationship, they didn't leave. They've been waiting, and they have been patient long enough.